Hey, hello friends, how are you all? This is Lakshya Arora and welcome back to my channel. So in this video, I've come up with some most commonly asked Azure interview questions. So let's get started. First question, let's say if you are planning to configure an Azure solution which will be used to protect your data in emails and documents, and using labels it will protect your data. So interviewer can ask you what Azure solution can you use. It is Azure Information Protection. So what is basically Azure Information Protection? As it suggests by its name, so Azure Information Protection is all about protecting all your sensitive data. Like if you are sending an email with some sensitive data, if you are sending a document with some sensitive data, let's say encrypted passwords or any keys or secrets, so you can make use of Azure Information Protection, and it will make use of labels. With the help of labels, your sensitive data will be secured. So this is one of the questions which is generally asked in an Azure interview. So now comes second question. It is all about containers. So like Azure Kubernetes service. So let me read the question. So what is the Azure solution that can be used to manage, scale and orchestrate the deployment of the containerized based application that they have developed? So for this we use Azure Kubernetes service. So Azure Kubernetes service is basically like we know what is Docker Swarm. Similarly, Azure Kubernetes service is there. You can orchestrate the deployment of your container applications. If you're familiar with Docker containers, then you must be knowing this Azure Kubernetes service. Next question. Assume that your manager consults you as an Azure administrator to find a solution that helps in distributing the different types of content to the customers globally with the highest possible bandwidth. It is Azure Content Delivery Network. So Azure has a content delivery network which is basically used for high streaming content, like in Netflix and various sites are there which use Azure Content Delivery Network, so that you get the like required videos, images at very good graphics, at very good rate, at very highest possible bandwidth, you can say. So for this, Azure Content Delivery Network is basically used if you want to distribute a content globally with the good bandwidth. You are requested to find a solution that can be used to distribute the traffic to your Azure VMs based on the attributes of the HTTP request. So for this, we use Azure Application Gateway. So there is a minor difference between Azure Application Gateway and Azure Load Balancer. This is also asked in interviews. Even in one of my interviews, it was asked, like, what is the difference between Azure Application Gateway and Azure Load Balancer? So both are basically used to distribute our traffic to the backend virtual machines. Both are used as a high availability solution. By high availability solution, I mean like if one of the VM goes down, then your another VM will be there to serve the traffic. So the minute difference is that in Azure Application Gateway basically use the layer 7 protocol for operation, while load balancer uses the layer 4. These layers are basically, I'm talking about the OSI model layers. If you are familiar with some networking part, then we have an OSI model in networking which consists of various layers. So application gateway follows the layer 7 and load balancer follows layer 4. So as the question says, it is used to distribute the traffic based on the attributes of the HTTP request. So according to the HTTP request, we can distribute the traffic to the backend virtual machines using Azure Application Gateway. Azure resource, like shutting down of VMs. We can check the activity. If you will go to virtual machines or any other Azure resource, you will see in the left side that there is a option called activity logs. So activity logs is basically used to track all the activities and which happened on your Azure resource. Let's say if let's consider the example of Azure Virtual Machine. If you want to know like who restarted the virtual machine or who stopped the virtual machine, then you can go to activity logs And in activity logs, like you will see various details like who's the person responsible for that event, at what time it was done, what is his ID, and all that details you will get in activity logs. So we can check all the activities in Azure using activity logs. Your Azure virtual machines. Like if you want your Azure virtual machines, like if you want the traffic, if you want only specific traffic should come to Azure virtual machines, then you can make use of Azure NSGs, network security groups. So network security groups consist of various rules. It comes with various rules that we can use to filter out the traffic. Sorry. Let's suppose if you want the traffic to come from a specific IP address from a specific port, and if you want that traffic to go to that particular destination only, then we can set the rules accordingly in network security groups. So network security group, you can understand like we have Windows firewall in our systems. Similarly, it is NSG, network security group, which is basically used to protect your Azure resources. An existing on-premise infrastructure and you plan to move the whole environment to Azure, which tool you can use to estimate the cost of your on-premise environment? So Azure total cost of ownership tool can be used. This is a simple question. Now this is a configuration file. So like cloud service configuration file, let me tell you, like every cloud service project consists of a configuration file. So it basically stores the external configurations like thumbprints of your certificates, number of role instances to deploy for each role in cloud service project, and it also stores user defined configuration files. So the primary aim is to reduce the downtime of your application. Let me give you an example. On Azure, and that web application is basically connected to some database or storage account. So if we make some changes in that web application configuration file, let's suppose if we are regenerating storage account access keys due to some security purpose, we usually regenerate the access keys in storage account. Let's suppose that access keys is used in that web application configuration file. As soon as we will change that key, it will restart our application pool, or simply consider it will result in a downtime of our application, because our application is dependent on the previous keys and we changed that keys in configuration file. So your application will go down. So to mitigate or to remove these scenarios, to avoid these scenarios, cloud service configuration file comes into play. What it does, it basically removes the dependencies of your application binaries, and if you will change the like parameters in this configuration file, you can do it from portal only, so it will not affect your application. Your application will be continuously up and running because it removes the dependency of your application on that file. So this is basically what a cloud service configuration file. So as it is written, the primary purpose is to allow configuration changes in production without downtime. So it is also used in real time, like in companies, cloud service configuration file. Downtime and cloud service deployments during upgrades and all hardware failures. So what is the best way? Just to keep it in your mind, like if you want to achieve zero downtime, if you want to achieve high availability in your cloud solution, just make a copy. Remember this, just make a copy. Let's suppose if you are running your application on a single virtual machine and you want that application to be up and running all the time 24/7, so what you can do, you can simply create one more virtual machine and you can host the same application on that virtual machine. So what you will be having, you will be having one more application. Overall you will be having two virtual machines and two web applications. Like what it is written, run at least two instances of each role. Role means, consider a role means virtual machine. Run at least two instances of each role within a cloud service. When we have two or more instances running for a role in cloud service, then automatically the deployment distributes across different fault and upgrade domains, and almost there is zero downtime. So what I mean to say is that if you are hosting your application into two or more virtual machines instead of a single machine, your availability of your application will definitely be increased. This is how like we increase the availability of your applications. And let me give you one more example. Like in Azure we have different regions: East US, West US, West US 2, Central US, and many regions are there. Let's suppose your traffic is coming from West US. All your virtual machines all are hosted in West US regions. So if you will host all the machines in West US only and your traffic will be dependent on that region only, definitely you might experience a downtime. Why? Because if there is some fault in the system or there is some patching activity, some deployment going on a virtual machine, then definitely it will result in the downtime and customers will be affected. What you can do, you can just replicate that entire system into another region, let's say East US. So by that you will achieve zero downtime. How? Because when you will be doing deployments or some upgrades or some patching on West US part, you can move your traffic to East US, so that your customer will be like they will be taking all the traffic from East US only. Like your traffic will be coming from East US. Then after your patching and all the things are done on West US, you can move your traffic back to West US. So this is how like things work. Next question. Running on Azure VM having web tier and DB tier. For achieving high availability, as you all know, availability sets can be used. Like for achieving high availability in case of Azure VMs, availability sets should be used along with at least 2 instances of VMs and implement this redundancy at every web tier and DB tier. Let me explain you further. So like here it means to say that if we use availability sets, it will definitely give us high availability, because when we put your virtual machines in availability sets, what it does, Azure basically puts your VMs into different fault domains and upgrade domains. So when it puts your virtual machines into different upgrade domains and fault domains, definitely there will be no single point of failure, and your machines will be safe. In case one machine is down, then the other machine will be up and running. So what is the question? What is the best practice for achieving the high availability of application running on Azure VM having web tier and DB tier? So here the question is like there is one tier which is hosting, one set which is hosting web applications and one set which is hosting your databases. So what you can do, you can have web tier 1 and web tier 2. Like this is what I meant to say. This is the entire web tier, and there is redundancy in web tier, and there is copy in web tier, and similarly there is a copy in databases tier as well, so that when your traffic will be coming, it will not be dependent on single virtual machine in web tier. It will be like your entire system will be a highly redundant system, what like I meant to say. So just keep these things in mind, like availability sets are a high availability solution and redundancy solutions are a high availability solutions. It is not asked much, but still I have included it in the video. What is the difference between Azure and Windows Active Directory? So Windows Active Directory means your on-premise Active Directory, which is generally used in your companies, corporates and offices. Azure Active Directory is basically cloud-based directory. Azure Active Directory is obviously more preferred as compared to Windows Active Directory. So let's start. So Windows Active Directory consists of 5 layers: Active Directory Domain Services, ADDS, Active Directory Federation Services, Active Directory Right Management Service, Active Directory Certificate Service, Active Directory Lightweight Directory Service. So this is the first line which I was saying. When Windows AD offers 5 core services: AD, CS, AD, RMS and so on. And Azure Active Directory basically accommodates all the things in a single solution, which is identity management from the internet. And you can pause this video if you want and you can read the whole slide. So Windows Active Directory is designed to operate in corporate network where companies have full control over topology. Okay, and in Windows Active Directory we use LDAP queries to fetch the data from Windows Active Directory database, while Azure Active Directory is based on HTTP or HTTPS protocols, and protocols are different in Azure Active Directory and Windows Active Directory. Windows Active Directory, as I told, uses LDAP queries to retrieve the data, and Azure Directory basically uses REST API. And Windows Active Directory cannot be integrated with SaaS applications. Active Directory, on the other part, can be integrated with applications such as Facebook, Salesforce, Dropbox. And since Azure Active Directory is a PaaS offering, platform as a service, so we don't have access to the underlying infrastructure, whereas in Windows Active Directory we have access to the underlying infrastructure, that is a domain controller. So this is just a theoretical part. I will not be wasting much time. What are the various ways by which an on-premise VM can be migrated to Azure? So there are various ways, like the best and quick way can be to migrate the associated OS disks and data disks from on-premise to Azure storage and then provision VM. So we can migrate the OS disks and data disks which are present in your on-premises VMs to Azure, and then we can make out a virtual machine from that. And we also need to understand what is the virtualization platform we will be using in cloud, be it Hyper-V or VMware. And also for creating virtual machines on Azure, we require VHD files. Okay, so all that things we need to take care. And VM can be provisioned. What is log analytics? So log analytics you can read this definition, but I am telling you in simple words. Log analytics basically acts as a container which is used to store all your logs. Like if you are using log analytics as a monitoring solution in your infrastructure, then you must be knowing that all the logs and performance counters, event related logs, all are collected into your log analytics, because it is basically a container which collects all the logs. Like we basically install agents, Microsoft monitoring agents in. If you have log analytics in your infrastructure, then you must be knowing. I'm sharing my own, only a brief. Like if you are using Microsoft monitoring agents to collect the performance counters and other logs, then all that logs comes to your log analytics, which is basically a single place to hold all your data, all your IIS logs, storage logs, infrastructure logs, capacity planning details. So all this data log analytics stores. So log analytics is not only limited to Azure, it can also be extended to AWS workload and your on-premises environment. Okay, you can generate many Power BI reports using log analytics. And what else you can do? Log analytics, it's a paid service, and based on the amount of data you are storing and fetching, it comes with a cost. And we basically use Kusto queries to fetch data from log analytics. So Kusto queries are basically used. So just remember all these things, that is enough. And what is the way to implement caching mechanisms? So Azure Redis Cache, it's a very popular service in Azure, which is basically using for caching. So caching means, like in your phone storage, you might have, if you've gone to the settings, you might be knowing that there is a caching setting. Caching means like your data is stored in a temporary storage. Let's say if you do www.google.com, this first time you do, it will take some time to open the web page, because this request from your local system will go to the Google server and all that's way it will travel, so it will take much time. Second time, when you will be opening that same page, it will not take large time. Why? Because the web page and all the required binaries, libraries will be cached in your system. So caching is all about like storing the data in temporary storage. So Azure Redis cache, as I told, is the most commonly caching mechanism which is available as a PaaS offering. Hosted on Azure, but due to security reasons, customer want database to be hosted on premise. What are the different ways to handle this connectivity? So in these cases, you can use point to site connectivity. Like looking at the requirement of connecting single on-premise DB machine to Azure hosted Azure VNet based point to site connectivity can be used. So point to site connectivity means establishing your connections from your on-premises to Azure. But one thing, point to site, by point means only few resources will be there on your on-premise. Like we have point to site connectivity, we have site to site connectivity, we have express route connection. So these are all the methods we can use to connect our on-premises infrastructure to Azure. So here what is the question? Application front end will be there on Azure, but the database will be on-premise. So there will be a single database which will be hosted on-premise. So we can use point to site because there will be a single database. And site to site means if you want to connect all the systems, if you want to connect your entire corporate network with the Azure cloud infrastructure, then you can use site to site. And express route is like used when you want some dedicated connections and we want low latencies between your on-premise and Azure, then we use express route systems. Told site to site connectivity, express route, other options by which we can connect. So site to site or point to site may introduce some network latency. To overcome this, we basically use express route connections. It is basically a dedicated connection between your on-premise and Azure, and low latency is there, and it comes with a cost. Like you need some external connectivity providers for that if you want to enable that. And one more thing, your traffic doesn't goes through internet when you implement this express route technique. In case user is not willing to, in case if user is not willing to use VNet based connectivity, then what is the option? In such cases, we can use WCF service, Windows Communication Federation service. I don't remember. So WCF service can be developed and you can host it on premises. It will have some CRUD operations, create, read, update and delete operations against the on-premises database. And we can also use service bus relay option for invoking on-premise WCF service from Azure hosted web application. So a combination of WCF and service bus relay will avoid the option of VPN connectivity. So there is also one more option in Azure. Like as I told, if you don't want VNet based connectivity, then you can use the service bus relay and WCF combination thing. Now this is again a theoretical based question. I will not be explaining much because video is getting lengthy. You can just read it on your own. What is the difference between SQL Server on VM and SQL Azure database? One is IaaS and one is PaaS offering. And since it is IaaS, so we can have access to the underlying infrastructure. But in case of Azure SQL database, we don't have access to the underlying infrastructure. And in SQL Server on VM, DB, mirroring, log shipping, replication, all these things are supported, whereas in SQL Azure database this is not supported. And you can read it. Yeah, on-premise application running few Windows service console applications to handle tasks. What should be the approach for migration? So 3 ways are there by which you can achieve background process migration to Azure through VMs, worker roles and web jobs. More preferred as compared to Azure VMs because Azure VMs are actually your virtual machines running on Azure. So like this is enough. Like these are basically asked, these are the basic questions. I will be making a separate video on advanced interview questions, which the questions which were asked from me in my interview. So they basically focuses on the implementation part, interviewers. If you are having 1 year experience, 2 year experience, then it's fine. You can go ahead with these questions. If you are even if you have 3 to 4 years of experience, then it's fine. If you are having more experience, then you need to have hands-on experience, and you need to think from like a designing perspective. How will you design? How will you implement in case you come across such a situation? So what will you do? Let's suppose if you want your client type it, uh, let's suppose if your client is having some IP address, and if he's going to that IP address and he's just changing the URL, he's in the suffix of the URL he is typing slash app1, and then the request is going to your first application through load balancer, and if he's typing slash app2, then the request is going to the second application through load balancer. So how these things are working, what is the background process behind that? So these are all the things which generally interviewers focus upon. So just go through blogs, read blogs, and watch my YouTube videos as well. I will be creating videos on that type of Azure questions also. So yeah, that's it for now, guys. And please do comment your feedback so that I will come to know where I am lacking and what will be my next topic. So that's it, guys, for now. Goodbye, Shabba Khair, Shubh Ratri. Thank you.